In this example, I want to go ahead and take a look at how we can use Node.js to create a API. And in doing so, we're going to use Express, which is a routing engine for Node, but it's a lot more than that as well. It's a really commonly used library that you're going to use a ton if you're going to be a Node developer. So to start things off, I want to go to my desktop and create a folder for this application. So I'm just changing my working directory to my desktop. And then I'm going to create a directory called Node API. And right now that's the only thing on my desktop, so I'm going to change my working directory to that Node API directory. And what I want to do is I want to use npm to init a new application. So I'm going to use this npm init command. And it's going to prompt me for basically diagnostics and information that it's going to populate my package.json file with. And I'm just hitting enter to all of it, and you'll notice that what ends up resulting from that is a package.json file. What the package.json file is it's a file that keeps track of my project dependencies, my npm project dependencies. So specifically for this API, we're going to have a dependency on Express. So I want to go ahead and install Express. So I'm going to do an npm install Express. And what it's going to do is, now if I look at my directory listing, you'll notice all these node modules. What it did is it allowed me to create those node modules. My package.json file now has a reference saying, hey, this project has a dependency on Express, so that I can use Express. Okay, so now I can go out to my project, and I'm going to open that project directory. So I'm going to go ahead and add a project folder, which will be that Node project folder. So I'm going to add this project folder. This is what's on my desktop. And then in order to actually work with this, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called app.js. Okay, and then this is going to be my starting point. Okay, so you'll see if I want to run this, I should be able to just type in here console.log hello world, and we should be off and running. We can see that from my terminal. So I want to escape out of here. We should be able to see that from my terminal. So if I use an npm node app.js, you'll see that I get that hello world text. If I change it, life's good there too. However, we're going to be building a web server to host our API, and we're going to use Express to do that. And as we change our file, we're going to have to reload the web server each time. And ultimately what we want to do is we're going to use the node monitoring tool so that we don't have to restart the web server every time. It just monitors our file system for changes. Okay, so let's go ahead and just get a web server off the ground first. Okay, so the way we're going to do that is we're going to bring in Express. So we're going to require the Express library. And then we're going to create an app from that Express library. And then in order for our web server to actually be working, we have to have our application listen on a specific port. So the way this works is I listen on a specific port. I have a callback function that will execute when I receive a request on port 3000. So this is actually when it starts up. So I'm going to have a listening on port 3000. And what you'll notice now is that we're not quite running. So I say I'm listening on port 3000. If I come out to a browser and I go to localhost 3000, you'll notice that I get an error message saying I can't get anything at the root directory. That's what that / is indicating. Okay, and that's because in Express I haven't defined a path. So if I want to define a path, so I just want to create some kind of hello world application, I can say when the user tries to get the root to the root of my website, this is what should happen. Okay, and the way this Express application engine works is that whatever path that I encounter, I'm going to get a callback function that will execute, and the callback function is always going to be past a request object and a response object. So really what we're looking at is when the user tries to go to the root of our website, when they go to localhost :3000, because we're running on port 3000, this callback is going to execute. And this request object has information that was passed to the server, so it could be query string parameters, it could be HTTP body parameters, it could be a whole host of things, but stuff that's passed to the server. The response object is going to allow us to send information to the server. Okay, so in our example, we might want to send just the message hello world. Okay, so super easy. We're going to have a hello world website. In order to do that, we're going to come back over to our terminal. You'll see that our application is still running even though we've made a change. I'm going to Control-C out of this to end it, and then I'm going to restart it by just issuing that node app.js command, and now you'll notice that when we go out to port 3000, we get hello world. If I want to change this, so again, my version of hello world is always cub-stink. If we want to change it, we have to go through that same iterative cycle of I'm going to shut down the web server, Control-C, I'm going to start it back up, and now I'll see the changes. That's kind of a pain in the butt for workflow. So instead of doing that every time, what I want to do is I want to take advantage of one of the Node tools that we can use, and that Node tool is NodeMon. So I'm going to use npm to install this again. So I'm going to do npm install NodeMon. Okay, and looks like that installed fine. And now when I start up my application, now I can use NodeMon and start up my application. So you'll see it's still running the same way. But if I come back through and say, there might be a Cubs fan in here, I want to change it back to hello world. And now you'll see that when I refresh the page, I don't have to go back to the terminal window to refresh this, to reload my application. NodeMon is monitoring the file system for my file system changes. Okay, so now we can actually start to get to work on our API. We have Express, we have NodeMon, we have an application, and now we have to define some paths. For this example, I want to go ahead and start with some hard-coded data. I don't want to actually work with any kind of persistent data store like MySQL or Mongo or anything like that. I just want to start with some simple data. So let's say we have courses, and we're going to have a collection of courses. And each course is going to be really simple. It's going to have an ID and then a title. Okay, so we might have our title, Advanced JavaScript, and then we're going to repeat this for a couple of courses. And we're building our API off of these courses. So we have Advanced JavaScript, we might have JavaScript frameworks, we might have a class called NodeJS, we might have a class called ES6, and then we might have a class called Badminton. Okay, and I'll get rid of that last comma, so we have valid JSON data. So this is the data that we're working with. And when I'm building an API, so I want to build a RESTful API, I'm going to have a single endpoint. So my single endpoint for this API is going to be API/courses. So what I want to do is I'm really building a RESTful API located at API/courses. And that's going to be my endpoint. Okay, so this is my endpoint, and then I'm going to have different verbs. So for instance, get, my HTTP get verb will retrieve all of my courses. I will have a post, which will do an insert. I'll have a put, which will do an update, and I'll have a delete, which will obviously remove a course. So that's the idea of this API, is that the get will read, the post will insert, the put will update, and the delete will delete, all using the same endpoint. Okay, and Express is great for this. So you may not have noticed this when we initially did it, but this app.get, this .get is really talking about an HTTP verb. So what we want to do is, if I go and I'm going to create a new endpoint, I'm going to say app.get, I'm talking about the HTTP get. The endpoint that I'm talking about is API/courses. I'm going to have a callback, request and response. And really what I want to do is I want to send a list of all of these courses. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to use this response.send to send all of the courses. However, since the courses are JSON, it's a JavaScript object, I'm going to use response.json. And what response.json does is it sends JSON to the browser. It also sets the content type to application/JSON, so I have the right content type, so the client that's consuming this API is getting the right information about what content is coming to the response. So in our case, we're sending back JSON, we're sending back all of the courses. Okay, so we've made that change, and now if we come over to our endpoint, API/courses, if I can spell, and you'll notice that obviously I can't get a specific course, but if I go to the correct endpoint where I just go to the API/courses, I'm getting the data that we were referencing in our application. So I have my advanced JavaScript, I have JavaScript frameworks, NodeJS, ES6, and then Badminton. Those are the 5 courses that I have listed here. That's what's getting served up as I access this API. Okay. I may also want to have an additional get. So right now I'm getting all of the courses. I might want to be able to get a course by ID. So I'm going to have another endpoint. So I want to do an app.get. I'm going to the API/courses. And now the way I want this URL to work is I want the user to supply an ID of the course that they want to access. So the way I'm going to handle that is I'm going to have this :ID, and the idea there is that I'm sending a parameter. Okay, so that's going to be my endpoint. Again, I'm going to get the request and response in my callback. And now the only thing that I have to do additionally is I'm given this ID. I want to use that to find the matching or corresponding course that has that matching ID. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a variable course equal to courses.find. So I'm going to this object, I'm trying to find a course that has that matching ID. I'm going to have a callback function basically saying, what am I looking for? So I'm passing in a course, and I'm checking, does that course ID equal, let's put some space here so that it's more readable, does this course ID match the ID that was passed in? And I want that ID that was passed in treated as an integer. The way I'm going to get the ID that was passed in is I'm going to go to the params collection, and I'm going to ask for the ID. So this ID is matching this parameter name. Okay, so I'm trying to find a course that has a matching ID. And then I can do something like if course response.json course, else response.json an empty object. Okay, so kind of a really straightforward example. And now if I come back over here, I should be able to go into the courses and ask for a course ID of 2 or 3 or 30, or 20 doesn't exist. I get an empty object. 200, get an empty object. 1, I get my object that I expect. So I can find a course by ID. Okay, so that takes care of the get. Okay, so we can have a course. Now I want to handle the post, and the idea with the post is that I should be able to insert a new record. Okay, so I'm going to have an endpoint that is the same, so it's API/courses. However, in this case, what I want to do is I want to generate a new course, and the idea here is that I am going to have the user send me the title of the new course, and then I will generate an ID. So I'm going to have an app.post. So if you access this URL via a post, then this is the function that's going to execute. So request, response, so kind of same exact format that we've been using. We have a post. I'm going to want to create a new course, and that new course is going to have information. So it's going to have an ID equal to some value, right? And then it's also going to have a title that theoretically should be passed to me. Okay, and I want to fill in the blanks here. Okay, so I'm going to eventually have this new course. We have to fill in the ID and title, obviously, in order to have that new course. And then all we're going to do is we're going to push that new course onto our array. And then I have a couple of options here. So I have this course object. I have all the data about the course. One thing I could do is I could just give a confirmation of success or failure. But most of the time with RESTful APIs, what ends up happening is I will respond with the new course. Okay, so on success, I'm going to send back JSON indicating here's the new course. And that is your confirmation. So if, for instance, I need the ID to update the user interface so that I can tie that new course to a particular ID, I'm going to get that back as part of the response. Okay, so then the next question is, how do we deal with the ID? A couple of ways we could handle this. I could have a variable in the application saying next available ID. That'd probably be the correct way to do it. I'm going to cheat here and make this as simple as possible. I'm just going to take the length of the courses, which is 5 right now, and increment it by 1. So courses.length plus 1. And I am aware that that is very fragile, right? So eventually we're going to get to be able to delete courses. So if I delete the Node.js course, after the fact I try to insert a new record, the ID would then be 5 because I'd only have 4 courses and increment it. So I realize it's fragile, but for this demo, I think it's certainly enough. The title, I'm going to need passed to me. Okay, and the way I'm going to have it passed to me is I'm going to have it passed through the request body. So a client is going to make a post request, and I'm going to want the title sent to me. It's going to be a parameter that's sent over to this post API. Okay, and the way I'm going to retrieve it, and this takes a little finesse and it takes a little bit of middleware, so we're going to have to make another change. I'm going to go to the request, I'm going to go to the body, and I'm going to ask for the title property. In order for me to be able to do that, in order for me to pull the title out of the request body, I have to do one more thing, and I have to basically say I want the Express application to have some middleware that allows the end users to send me JSON data. So I'm going to take this application and I'm going to say the application should use this JSON middleware. Okay, so this is what's enabling me to grab the title out of the request body for this post, create a new course. Okay, so I save it, it's running, life's good there. What I want to do now is I want to go to my Chrome applications and I want to open up Postman. Okay, so I'm just going to open up Postman. I have it already installed, so I'm launching it. Okay, it's a native app now. It's being deprecated. Obviously, that's what it's telling me. I just want to make a request. I don't necessarily need to name it. I want to clear all of my history, sure. And what I want to do is, I don't want to do a put. I want to do a post, and I'm doing that to API/courses. And then in the body, you'll notice I have a title here. I was already playing around with this a little bit. So I'm using raw data. I'm sending a title. The headers, there are no headers. So in the body, I'm going to send JSON data to this API endpoint. So if I send it, okay, you'll notice that I get a response back, which gives me a confirmation, hopefully, that it was successful. I get an ID and a title, Music for Dummies. And then if I skip back over to my browser, okay, so I just want to be back at my courses. And I want to look at all of the courses now. And you'll notice that Music for Dummies is getting served up. So we were able to insert that new record, Music for Dummies, using our endpoint where we were posting our data. Okay, so we're posting through our HTTP body. We're sending JSON data. We're sending just a title. And then if we get back over to our API, I'm reading the value of the title as part of the new course. The ID is getting generated, and we talked about how fragile that ID generation process is. But between the two of those, we're able to create a new course and push it onto our collection of all courses, and we're outputting that new course in our post response. So that's what we're seeing down below, is we're seeing that post response right here. Okay, and then when we skip back to the browser, that new course is showing up as a result of us adding it. Okay, so that, if we're looking at our API, takes care of our post. I'm going to skip the put for the time being and handle the delete because I think the delete is easier. It's a lot of the stuff that we've already done. So I'm going to go to app.delete. It's the same endpoint. We're going to have a request. We're going to have a response. And with the delete, what we want to do is we want to figure out which course we want to remove. So in order to do the delete, you're going to have to send me the ID of the course that you want to remove. And now I know how to grab that already, so I'm going to have a variable course to remove, and it's going to be equal to the same logic that we used up above when we were getting a course by ID. So we have that function courses.find. We're finding a course with a matching ID, so I just copy and paste that. So I find the course that matches. And then I want to find the index. So we're going to go to the courses. We're going to get the index of course to remove. So we're finding where it's located in the array. And then we want to remove it from the array. So we're going to go to the array. We're going to splice out that one element starting at the index and taking exactly one. And then we're going to respond with that course to remove. That's our confirmation indicating that that course has been removed. Okay, so as we've made changes to this file, NodeMon's been monitoring our API, and you'll notice that in our API, our course is no longer there. Our new course, Music for Dummies, is no longer there. Okay, so I want to put it back in because that's the data that I ultimately want to remove. So every time this application gets reloaded as a result of a change, which is going to happen as a result of us having NodeMon installed, every time that file changes, the web server reloads, we lose our data because we don't have persistent data. So I'm going to go back to Postman. I'm going to send the exact same post. So I send the exact same request. Now you can see that our data includes Music for Dummies. And now what I can do is I can come over to Postman and say, I want to do a delete, but I want to delete the course with an ID of 6. Okay, so now I'm sending an HTTP delete. I'm sending an ID of 6 to that URL, and you'll notice that I get confirmation back that, yes, this was the course that was to be removed. And now if I look at my courses, my list of all courses, you'll see that it's removed. I can pick an arbitrary ID. So for instance, let's say I wanted to get rid of JavaScript frameworks. Okay, so a course with an ID of 2. So I'm going to courses with an ID of 2, I send the request, it's another delete request, and now you'll notice that my data no longer includes that record with an ID of 2. Okay, however, if I stop my application or make a change to cause it to reload as a result of NodeMon running, this data is going to be refreshed. I'm going to have my 5 initial records that were hard-coded into the application. Okay, so this is our delete portion of our RESTful API. So that kind of takes care of that one. And I skipped over the put initially. And the reason I skipped over the put is because updates are usually tough. And by that I mean we have a data set, and as an API developer, you really have to decide what's updatable. And in our case, it's pretty straightforward. We only have 2 fields, and that was intentional on my part to make this easier. I have 2 fields for each course, an ID and a title. It doesn't make sense that the ID is unique, and essentially it's a primary key for that courses collection. It doesn't make sense that we'd make that updatable. Okay, so once you're assigned an ID, you're stuck with that ID. However, if we're going to do an update, let's allow users to update the title. Okay, so again, this example was chosen on purpose to simplify this process. There's a lot of times where your objects are going to be more complex than just 2 attributes, a primary key and some other attribute. And part of the update process is you deciding what's actually updatable. Okay, so for our purposes, just the title is updatable. Okay, so we're going to have an app.put. That's where our update occurs. It's going to be to the same URL, so API/courses. We are going to need an ID. And we could have the title here as well, so we could pass that in the URL. However, let's get the ID from one place and then the title from another place. And that other place that we want to get our title from is we're going to get it from the request body. Okay, so we'll have a parameter for the ID, and then the title is going to get sent to us as JSON. So we're going to have the request, we're going to have the response. And the reason we're doing that with the title is because I could embed a lot of data up in the URL. That starts to get messy. And in our case, we only need the title, but chances are if you have an object that is more complicated, you might have to send more than just the title. And then it makes it nice to be able to send that information through JSON. Okay, so we're going to have a course to update. So we're going to have a variable course to update. And we're going to use that same syntax where we go find the course based on the ID. Okay, and then we're going to change the title. And the way we're going to get the title is we're going to go to the request body and ask for the title. And then we're just going to send the response, which is the course to update. Okay, so our update is actually fairly straightforward because we don't have any persistent data at this point. We're going to find the course that we want to update, we get a reference to it, we change the title, and we confirm back to the user that we're making this update. Okay, in order to test this out, so we've made changes, the file saved, you'll see that our initial data set is back. We have the JavaScript frameworks back in our data set. If we want to change that, so let's say we want to handle an update, we're going to do a put, and we're going to update the course with an ID of 2. So that's in the URL. What we need to send is the data. And the way I'm going to send the data, let's clear all this. The way we're going to send the data, and this looks like it's actually sending me back. This is where I want to change the title. Music for Dummies is actually fine for the title because we don't have that yet. We might say car engines for dummies. Okay, so we want to change course 2 from JavaScript frameworks to car engines for dummies. We're sending an HTTP put. We're sending 2 parameters. We're sending the ID in the URL, and then we're sending the title in the HTTP request body. And then I'm going to go ahead and send the request. Okay, and you'll notice that I get the response. that I'm looking for. And then if I come back over to the browser, I'm doing an HTTP GET by typing into the address bar. You'll see that the ID to title has now been updated to reflect the fact that we did this put to handle the update. Okay, so this is kind of the basics of creating an API in Node. And then what we're doing is we're using a really powerful library, which is Express. And Express allows us to create these different endpoints based on the HTTP verb that got us to those endpoints. We're also getting into the fact that there's going to be different parameters that are passed to us. So this is kind of a really simple, straightforward example of creating a RESTful API in Node.js. So we have a RESTful API, and now we can have various clients access this RESTful API. So we might have a web application accessing it, we might have an Android application accessing it, we might have an iOS application accessing it. So kind of all over the board on what's going to access this API.